On this episode, we talk with an attorney in Tulsa about bicyclists and the law. A Tulsa businessman bought bicycles for his employees. We learn about Mothers Against Drunk Driving from their national president. We meet the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for Somerville, Massachusetts. Finally, we look at Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, North Carolina. Stay tuned. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, talking with Malcolm McCollum, who's an attorney. Briefly, what's the law regarding bicyclists on the roads?
In Oklahoma, actually, our state law was just recently amended. It's very similar to that of many other jurisdictions. The law in Oklahoma is that cyclists are vehicles. They're entitled to use of all the roadways except any restricted access highways, for example. And as a vehicle, they are to ride on the right side of the roadway, as close to the right as is reasonable and safe, generally speaking, except when making left-hand turns.
And what mistakes do bicyclists typically make?
John, probably the most common mistake I see are cyclists riding the wrong way on the roadway against the grain of traffic. I'm an attorney here in Tulsa, and I've practiced for 25 years and tried a number of jury cases regarding cycling and motor vehicle accidents. Last case I tried, I asked the panel of 12 jurors what the proper legal way of riding on the roadway was. And 8 out of those 12 jurors told me that they were to ride on the left-hand side against the grain of traffic. I think that's probably a common misperception.
What's the implication when jurors don't understand what the law is?
Well, when you're in a jury trial representing a cyclist, one thing that as lawyers we all have to keep in mind is that probably every one of those jurors has a car, has a driver's license, and drives. Not all of them ride bicycles, so one thing you have to remember is that you're talking to people from a driver's perspective, a motor vehicle driver's perspective. That's probably the first thing.
And do you find, do law enforcement personnel always understand what the law is for bicycles?
In Tulsa, we're pretty fortunate because the leadership in our law enforcement community has been very receptive to the needs of cyclists and pedestrians alike, and pretty knowledgeable. And that knowledge has filtered down to most of the officers on the street. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but we're pretty fortunate here in Tulsa. I do find that once we get outside the metropolitan area and some of the outlying communities, knowledge of the rules of the road as they pertain to cyclists isn't that great.
And what complications can that create if an officer who doesn't necessarily understand the law is filling out the accident report form?
Well, sometimes when an officer arrives on the scene, that can be a critical time in a legal proceeding, whether it be a criminal proceeding or a civil proceeding, because that's the one moment in time you oftentimes have to capture and preserve evidence, skid marks, measurements, things like that. And if an officer shows up unaware of the rules of the road, unaware of a cyclist's rights, and assumes that the cyclist may have done something wrong, or the cyclist was at fault, or didn't have the right to be where he was, that evidence may be lost.
What's the key to educating the public in general and police and court officials about the law? What needs to be done?
Well, that's probably the million-dollar question. I bet you see that in a lot of communities. There are several levels of education that need to happen. Obviously, law enforcement is one, and probably it's the one here, at least locally, that has the best knowledge. Cyclists themselves need to know. what the rules of the road are. Not to ride, for example, against the flow of traffic. Not to ride, for example, on sidewalks in commercial areas. To act like a vehicle on the roadway. Motor vehicle drivers need to be educated about cyclist rights, that they do have a right to be there, where they're supposed to be, and that they are expected, for example, in multiple lane roads, for example, a 4-lane road, to make a left-hand turn from the left-hand side of the road. Another thing, for example, in Tulsa, we do not have a mandatory side path law. Some cyclists mistakenly believe that some of the off-road paths and trails around here that are recreational trails mean that some motor vehicles believe those trails are there for the cyclists, and that the cyclists have no right to be on the road where there's a trail. That's not a correct interpretation of the law.
We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, talking with Chris Zentafer. What sort of bicycling events go on here in Tulsa?
Well, just this year we created an event called Tulsa Tough, and it was a 3-day cycling event. Featured pro and amateur level racing, and 3 days of criterium racing, and then 2 days of rides ranging from 50 miles to 100 miles.
Now, what's the difference between a criterium race and a ride?
Well, a criterium race would be on a closed course, usually typically less than a mile, very spectator friendly, very fast paced, lots of twists and turns, and we used to try to throw in some hills and technical corners. And a ride, would just be over a very long distance, like, upwards of 50 to 100 miles, and you cover the same ground, whereas a criterium, you repeat the ground over and over. So similar to NASCAR or Formula One.
What sort of response have you gotten from the bicycling community here in Oklahoma?
Well, they came out of the woodwork for this event. We filled up most of our field limits in the races, and we had about 500 riders for our first year, which was far exceeded our expectations, and it's continued to grow. I think we're going to be a designated training ride for the MS or for the leukemia teams in training next year, so we expect a lot of those people here for our rides, and we expect to fill up the fields. And then also from a city standpoint, we had 15,000 spectators over the weekend, so it was phenomenal from that perspective. It was great awareness in the city about cycling.
Now, a little more close to home here, what do you do for bicyclists at your business?
Well, this past Christmas, we bought everyone in the company a breezer bike, and some of those people keep them here at the office, and some people take them home with them. And it's really to encourage commuting, to encourage conserving energy, to promote a healthy lifestyle, and it's had a tremendous effect on the business. We have very healthy people here, and a lot of them do commute. We have 5 or 6 that are regular commuters here. So, and we're a small business, so 15 employees. So it's been a great impact, and also it kind of puts life on the streets around us. People see us and talk to us about it, and we go ride to the little restaurants around here, and we put our clients on bikes. We bought 5 other bikes to take our clients to lunch on, and those are kind of the funky electro bikes, and so it creates a lot of conversational buzz, and other people are like, well, where do I get one of those, and what do you guys do, and all this stuff. So it's been really good for us and for the community.
Small business somewhere else that might be thinking of doing something similar, what advice could you give them?
I think it's, we worked with a local bike shop, and we went in and we tried to find a simple bike that, me being a cyclist, I have a tendency to go and look a lot farther than what the average person might want to ride or what they might feel comfortable with. We found the breezer bikes that have the internal gearing, the Nexus gearing, so 3 speeds. We kept it simple. We have racks, bells, locks, helmets, all of those things, and just made it simple so that anyone in the office could just hop on it and go. So that's basically what we thought was the simpler we make it, the easier it is for people to get involved, and then they can kind of go from there. So it was a great benefit for the business and everyone. It's kind of one of those things that everyone always talks about. Of course, you walk in our office, it looks like a bike shop, but we can get away with it.
We're at the Governor's Highway Safety Association conference in Oklahoma City, and we're talking with Glenn Burge, who's the national president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD. What does MAD do?
Well, we're an organization that, first of all, is our mission is stop drunk driving, to support the victims of the violent crime, and prevent underage drinking. We've been around for 26 years now, so we've come a long ways. I'll say 26 years ago, alcohol deaths were amounted to about 30,000. Now we're down to about 17,000. So we've reduced fatalities by about 40%, but that's not enough. We're still, 17,000 is still too many people. Just one person due to alcohol, drunk driving is one too many.
Is it just vehicle occupants that are dying, or are others affected as well?
Alcohol affects more than just drunk driving. Obviously, when someone's driving drunk, they hit pedestrians. I have a personal case of that. My son was hit by a drunk driver. But it affects more than just driving. So that's why we incorporate the prevention as well, underage prevention, because obviously we can stop this at an early age. However, it affects more than just driving. Primarily, though, our mission is drunk driving and how we can prevent people who are impaired getting behind the wheel.
What are some of the things coming along that might help on that?
Well, one tool that has come quite a ways is, as far as technology, is the ignition interlock. If a drunk driver, and we're saying ignition interlocks should be applied to vehicles when you have the first offense. When you have that first offense, that means we have to change your behavior. Doing so with treatment and involving the technology of placing a piece of equipment on your car that allows it'll only start if you blow in it and you're alcohol free. That's going to help prevent, of course, a drunk driver from getting behind the wheel. And that has proved to work. It has helped recidivism, and I'll say anywhere from 80 to 90% it works while it's on the vehicle. So that's just one way, of course, technology, and I talked about treatment. But having harsher penalties and making sure that it's not applied to someone who has second, third, fourth offense. It's habitual, and that's too late. We really need to start doing this on the first offense, and we have the technology today to improve that.
And it's good to see new technology coming along, or even established technology getting applied more. But beyond the technology, social attitudes toward drinking and driving. How key is that to what you've been able to do over the years?
It's important. First of all, the success of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Obviously, I'm here to tell you that I'm just proud to be the national spokesperson for such an organization. It began, though, as a grassroots organization, meaning the public, the community can make a difference in changing laws and behavior. And that's why MAD has been so successful. It's because we put a face to the statistic. The average person who has no idea that someone's going to crash, and I say crash, it's not an accident when you involve alcohol, but crash and injure and kill people is ridiculous. We can change this. This is 100% preventable. And so we, as individuals, can change behavior by also changing laws and attitude about drunk driving.
So you say your family was affected by a drunk driver? Yeah.
Most of the time people think when you talk about losing a loved one, the child was involved in the crash in a car. And my son, who was killed May 3rd, 1988, was at his grandmother's, and he was just 21 months old, heard the alluring sound of an ice cream truck in the neighborhood, and he followed his two older cousins outside, unattended, just trying to follow the big boys. And as he was about to cross the street of a residential neighborhood, a car was going over 70 miles per hour. It struck my son and of course, killed him going at that speed with that impact. Drug his body 150 feet before the car came to a stop. So he wasn't in the vehicle, but the vehicle hit him, a drunk driver. So it's more than just people involved in the car crash themselves. And many times the results of impairment where people are walking just trying to cross the street and are also hit. So that's the opposite. But, so alcohol is involved in deaths where we need to really change and focus on how we can prevent this from happening. But our major focus, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, is to drunk driving. That's where we really want to focus. And my son would be here today if that driver hadn't decided to get behind the wheel drunk. So it makes an impact, and I want everyone to know of how we can prevent this from happening with many issues. As I talked about technology, the partnerships, everyday citizens getting involved, making a change about the behavior and the social attitude of this is just a rite of passage. It's not.
We're in Somerville, Massachusetts, talking with Stephen Winslow, who's the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for the city of Somerville. What does a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator do?
In Somerville, I've been focusing on a few things. One of the things, I'm leading up what's called the Safe Start team, which is a team that's assessing dangers to pedestrians and bicyclists. What we've done is take a look at accident data and identify the most dangerous intersections in our community for pedestrians and bicyclists. And we are standing on one right now, the intersection of McGrath Highway, which is overhead, and Washington Street. This is a very poorly designed intersection for pedestrians and cyclists. There's a lack of pedestrian heads here, faded crosswalks, very little guidance for pedestrians, and it's also confusing for motor vehicles as well. So it's a very difficult, dangerous intersection, and we're doing these assessments so we can both for our city streets, and this one involves both the state and the city to make things better. So that's one of the roles I play. Another role I play is working to improve our trails, our multi-use trails. There's one in the Somerville called the Somerville Community Path. Amazingly, that path is used by 1,000 people a day to access our subway station. We want to see more of that. We're extending a subway line further into Somerville, and we're going to work to see that we get 1,000 people going to each one of those new stations as well. So those are the type of things that I'm doing as bike and pedestrian coordinator.
An intersection like the one behind us, other than blowing it up and starting over, what can you do with it?
Well, one of the things we're seriously considering about is blowing up and starting over. Now that the big dig has been completed, that partially runs up to Somerville. That carries most of the traffic into Boston now. McGrath Highway was the original road taking traffic into Boston. So the thought is that perhaps the overpass here could be torn down. This could become an urban boulevard, which is more bike and pedestrian friendly. You could put in traffic signal heads that have, pedestrian crossing signals, better marked crosswalks, countdown signals, bike loop detectors, that type of thing that could make it safer here. You have very long crossings. You can narrow those down with curb extensions and that type of thing. So we definitely think blowing it up is maybe the best thing to do here. So short of that, I think certainly just upgrading the traffic signalization here would be important. So.
Some of the other streets in town, walking in from the Orange Line subway station, what's it like for pedestrians?
We started out over in Charlestown and East Somerville, where the Sullivan Square MBTA station is. And what we find there is that you have a major residential street called Broadway and Commercial Street Broadway, which is overpassed by Interstate 93. That's basically 10 lanes of motor vehicle traffic. And there's about 5 feet of sidewalk amongst all that pavement. And that's one of the issues where we have people walking through from our very densely populated neighborhoods of 2 and 3 family homes to a subway station on a very narrow sidewalk amongst all this traffic. And that's something that we want to work with Boston to improve. We put in some grant applications. We're going to continue to pursue that. I know our senators and aldermen were over there recently, so it's important to widen that sidewalk, make that area brighter and cleaner. That's what we want to do, because a lot of people are walking to the subway stations, which is great. And we just want to make it more accommodating for those folks. So,
in that case, you're crossing lines to Boston. You're really nestled in amongst other cities and townships here, as well as having the state highways to deal with. What sort of complications does that make, having to deal with all these different jurisdictions?
Well, I mean, that's one of the roles I'm playing as bike and pedestrian coordinator. I know in the city, when I talk about state highways, the immediate reaction from our traffic engineer people is like, oh, that's the state responsibility. But my role is to look at things bigger and to push issues up to a higher level, that if it's technically out of our jurisdiction, then we work with our representatives, the mayor and the aldermen, to make sure that the state people are coming out. We had a wonderful meeting in East Somerville with the State Department of Conservation and Recreation. At McGrath Highway and Broadway, there's a major park for the community that people have to cross, basically 8 lanes of traffic to get to that park. The community is very much interested in making that a safer crossing, and the state folks came out for that and are now reviewing that intersection, even though it was recently redesigned a couple years ago, seeing if there can be some further accommodations such as countdown lights and slightly more pedestrian timing in that area. So we have to pin down the state people to make those improvements. This is a big challenge here, because it's obviously when you're talking about tearing down a highway, that's a major undertaking. But as you can see, if we don't tear it down, it's probably going to come down itself. So something has to happen here.
And when you're trying to encourage pedestrian activity, there's the problem getting the infrastructure up to standard. But there's more to promoting walking. Somerville is one of the Raleigh Johnson active living communities. What's the partnership you put together here?
Right, we have a great partnership, within the community. Our health department leads that up with involvement from our DPW and our traffic and parking and community development offices. We have a partnership with Groundwork Somerville, which has been the project manager, our bike committee, Friends of the Community Path, the Cambridge Health Alliance. So Tufts University has been very much involved in that. So we have a great partnership that's working on that. Tufts University did a major study of childhood obesity and has promoted walking to school. Within the community, I was hired as bike and pedestrian coordinator under that program as part-time, and the city has picked up my salary once that funding has wrapped up. We're working to create some walking maps to encourage people to get out and walk. One of the major activities that I'm working on is extending our community path from Somerville all the way into Boston. That will also be the major walking route to our new subway line as well. So those are the type of things that we're doing with the partnership. And we did win the award for working on infrastructure from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So we haven't had the shovel hit the ground yet, but we've made some good progress in securing property to get our path done and other things. So.
We're in Raleigh, North Carolina, talking with Eric Lamb, who's with the City Public Works Department. What's the street we're on?
This is Fayetteville Street. Fayetteville Street is the heart of downtown Raleigh and the focus of a large part of the new economic engine that's going on downtown. This street is in the process of being remade. It was originally a main street for North Carolina. Many businesses, movie theaters, prominent shops located along here up through the 1960s. And then you started to see the office pattern start to change, more suburban development take place around the fringe, and you started to see businesses moving out away from downtown. So in an effort to address that, and in the style of the time, in the mid-1970s there was a pedestrian mall installed here. The street was taken up and all the parking was removed and it was made into a pedestrian mall. And it was a very nice pedestrian mall. It won several different awards. Unfortunately, it solved the pedestrian problem, but it failed to address the economic problem. And as such, the businesses down here had a rough go of it for several years. And so finally, a few years ago, the decision was made to reopen the street. And that's happening now nationwide across the country in many other communities as well. The difference here, though, is that in putting back the street, it's being done as a much smaller street than what was done before. There was a strong desire to make this, again, a ceremonial gathering place, a place where parades would take place as they did before. But the street is much narrower than what it originally was. It'll have parallel parking instead of the diagonal parking that it had back at the turn of the century. But it will also have much wider sidewalks. The sidewalk zone that's being created as part of this project will help facilitate the volumes of pedestrians that we have downtown. It is one of the highest focus areas that we have, but it'll also help facilitate the desires that we have in the community to try and do outdoor art, more public seating, more outdoor dining, and so we look for it to be a very successful project when it's opened.
It's sort of a balancing act between having bountiful pedestrian space, good pedestrian space, and still having vehicle access to the area. How have people resolved that in different places, and how did you come up on the solution you came up with here?
I don't think there's any one solution for any other place in the country. We took some folks around and looked at a few other places where there have been successful pedestrian miles, like I believe Charleston, Virginia, or West Virginia has a very nice pedestrian mile that has a lot of programming and does very well. But other communities, such as Spartanburg, South Carolina, has successfully pulled out their mall and done work. There was a huge public involvement process when we started this. There were over 500 different people that were involved, with both folks that worked here, folks that were property owners here, and folks that were pedestrians. And through that discussion, that was how the consensus was reached. We had Cooper Carey and Kimberly Horn Associates as the architects and engineers that were working on the project. Did a very nice job with facilitating the public input. Many meetings, many hours of discussions, and it was tough to reach a consensus. One of the big stumbling blocks was talking about reintroducing parking, and if we were going to reintroduce parking, should it be parallel or angled parking? Again, you have the benefit of having more spaces if you go with an angled parking approach, but the trade-off is that you create a less friendly pedestrian zone, and ultimately the decision was made to do it as parallel parking.
A lot of chaos right now. When's it all going to be finished?
It should be finished right now. It's about 2 months out from completion. One of the big problems with the project has been trying to relocate the utilities. I mean, you've got 200 years of history here underneath these streets. They found 200-year-old utilities and drains and things like that. So it's been real tough as a construction project, but they're getting close to completion now.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.